Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today to either paint along with me or to watch me paint. Today we're going to be doing a landscape with a gray barn in it. I used to paint with my dad once a week, and he had all kinds of rules about painting, and one of the rules he insisted upon was every barn must be red. Well, sorry Dad, this one's not going to be red. Let's get started. Okay, let's start with our sketch. First, the barn, roof of the barn, a little bit of an overhang. Opening in the front of the barn. Some hills in the background. This is going to be a couple of trees in the foreground. Put a couple of trees behind the barn. This is going to be a fence to the right of the barn. Some more trees in the background. Sketch a couple shapes in the foreground. Draw a couple of windows in the barn. Made the fence a little too high, so lowering that just a little bit. And there we have our basic sketch. Now, as I have done in other paintings, I start with the sky. So there's Pthalo Blue and Titanium White. Pthalo Blue green shade, and mix them together and fill in the sky. This is the undercoat, so it doesn't need to be perfect by any means. Just filling it in. We are also going to use this Pthalo Blue and White combination for the undercoat of the barn. So we're just filling in larger areas first, not worried about detail. A little bit of the light blue on the roof of the barn. Notice that the left side of the barn is a little bit darker. That's because it would not be exposed to as much light. Now I'm using yellow ochre, and I'm filling in the trees in the background. I'm thinking this is going to be more of a autumn type colored painting, so I'm not filling in the trees with green. Filling them in with yellow ochre. Fill in a tree behind the barn, fill in some of the shapes in the foreground. Now I'm using Pthalo Blue and Burnt Umber, which, when you mix them together, creates a very dark color, just for the undercoat of the trees and some of the other areas. It makes a very dark brown, almost black. 3 openings there for the door, another small door. Windows of the barn, so that's burnt umber and phthalo blue. Using a thinner brush, just some of the lines. Now I'm painting the fence, which is going to need to be touched up because I painted it lower. Now I'm using Pthalo Green and yellow, Cadmium Yellow Medium, Pthalo Green, blue shade to do the undercoat of the grasses in the yard. Come behind the fence and I can at least cover up some of the higher marks of the fence. Add a little green up in the trees. It's going to be a fall painting basically, but still there would still be some green in the trees. Burnt sienna and yellow ochre now. Burnt sienna and yellow ochre for these hills in the background, because the trees would have gotten to be this reddish brown color. A little bit of yellow ochre and burnt sienna here to create a small tree in front of the barn. Add a little bit of that color here and there in the background trees. Now I'm adding some more yellow and green to define the fence a little more. As you do a painting, you just keep defining areas more and more, so you don't need to have it perfect from the very beginning. Now this is a mixture of gloss polymer medium and matte medium, and I'm going to show you something that we're going to do with a larger brush. Pthalo Blue. This is gloss polymer and matte medium mixed together, and I'm going to make a glaze using the Pthalo Blue. Now, I had to let this first coat of the painting dry first, so I couldn't put the glaze over while the painting was still wet. And I put this glaze on because it makes the background richer looking, makes the colors richer looking. It also fills in any little white spots from the canvas that I may have not covered with paint. So it's covered with this glaze now. Once the glaze has completely dried, I'm taking Pthalo Blue, yellow ochre, and white, and I'm going to begin working back into the sky. I'm using a smaller brush, making smaller strokes, creating cloud shapes. I want the barn to stand out, so I'm making it brighter along the edge of the top of the roof of the barn. And even after I work on the sky, I will come back later and work on it some more. Using an even smaller brush now, to add some white mixed with yellow ochre, so the clouds are not simply a pure white. So you can see the contrast there between the barn and the background white and yellow ochre with white really makes that section of the barn stand out. So wherever you want to draw the eye of your viewer, you make contrast. I've added some burnt umber to my palette now because I'm going to be working on some of the boards on the barn, so I'm going to mix a little burnt umber and phthalo blue together with white. Burnt umber and phthalo blue and white make a kind of grayish color. So there's going to be some brown tones, some gray, some light colors in the front of the barn. Obviously wouldn't be a pure color because it's been sitting there for years. Little lighter colors on the roof because the sunlight would be coming down on the roof. Using mostly phthalo blue, but mixing a little bit of burnt umber with it here and there for the overhang. Make a dark line there. Make some other lines. Phthalo blue, darken that up a little bit. Add a little bit of colors into the windows. Just keep adding more and more. Work on the fence a little more. A little bit of blue on the edges of the hills in the background and the trees back there. Now I've got yellow ochre and burnt sienna, reddish brown, and a little bit of white there too, which I'm going to mix together for the hills in the background. Again, putting on little dabs here and there, leaving some of the background to show through. A little bit of that reddish brown underneath the bushes there and in the background here. I'm going to paint some reddish brown on this tree here in front of the barn. Now some reddish brown in the foreground. Added a little bit more white to the burnt sienna to make these trees here stand out a little bit more. Yellow ochre, white, burnt sienna. See the glaze in the background shining through in places, makes it just look much more rich than if I were just applying the other colors directly. Added a little bit of yellow, a little bit of phthalo green to my palette, mixing yellow and green together. Work on some of the grasses. You can see that I'm also defining the fence more. That's what's so great about acrylics and oils, is if you make a mistake, you just paint over it, define it. Adding some lighter green has more yellow mixed in with it, just to make this foreground stand out more, pop a little more. A little bit of green in the background. A little bit more yellow-green up in these trees, a little bit more reddish-brown. Adding burnt sienna, adding yellow mixed with yellow ochre. You can see I'm working on the whole painting at once. I'm not getting hung up on any one area. Just keep adding to the whole painting. Okay, there's burnt umber, white, yellow ochre, burnt sienna. Gonna mix some of that burnt umber, dark brown, with a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow ochre to add to the trees in the foreground, because they wouldn't be just simply one color. They'd be a variety of shades of brown. Add a little bit more to these windows. Just keep making the colors richer and richer. Now I will add some touches of burnt sienna, add some lines of burnt sienna here and there, just to create variety in the colors and the lines of the barn and the fence. Add some burnt sienna up here in the trees. Just keep working on tiny details, add more detail. Now I'm adding some yellow ochre mixed with burnt sienna. Now adding yellow and green, more yellow in there to brighten up the green grasses and trees. Now I'll begin to add a little more work on the sky, some light blue. And add more white along the top of the mountains in the background, and add white to contrast with the top of the barn to make that just stand out more. Work on the trees a little bit more, put some holes in the trees there, between the leaves. Add a little more yellow ochre and white to the sky. Now add a little bit more to the tree trunks in the front and to the doors. A little more dark brown, burnt umber. So you can see as the painting is developing, I'm just adding more and more detail. We start with large general areas, and then we keep getting more and more detailed. Working on the fence some more. adding light blue here and there. Even adding more white and yellow now to make more contrast on the edge of the fence and in front of the barn a little bit. Yellow and white here make this grass stand out next to the dark patch. Adding more and more little dabs of paint to create more detail in the foreground, because, as I've mentioned before, generally it's more detailed in the foreground and then less detailed in the background. So I'm going to be adding even more detail in the foreground. Adding lots of dabs of paint up in the tree. This is the Impressionist style of painting. Lots of little dabs. It's not quite pointillist painting, but it's lots of small dabs of brush strokes. Now I'm adding little individual grasses with a very fine brush, very thin brush, using yellow and green and yellow ochre. Swiping up from the bottom, lots of thin strokes of grass. So you can see how I'm swiping up from the bottom. So as I've mentioned before, when I'm working on a painting, it's like working on a jigsaw puzzle. Add some color in one spot, and then I look at the painting and say, okay, now I need some more over there. Add a little bit more over there. Then I say, all right, now I need to add some down here. And it's just a matter of just working on the whole canvas, continuing to add paint where it's needed, add colors to make things stand out, add more detail. Adding some more definition with a very fine brush and dark paint. Even adding some blue grasses, blue strokes. Continuing to add a little more to the sky and to the roof of the barn. So you can remember we started the barn with light blue. Now it's all different colors added to it. Yellow ochre, burnt sienna, white mixed with burnt umber. Adding a little brownish tone to the roof. Almost finished here, and there you have it. Thanks for painting along with me, or for watching this if that's what you did. Appreciate it.